There are forces of good and forces of evil at work in the world today. What are these forces? Who is responsible for the good? And who is responsible for the evil? Richard Schaff talks about current events which are rarely discussed by the mainstream media, events that affect us all. This program seeks to identify, to inform, and to equip the believer for what's ahead. Welcome to What in the World is Going On?
This is What in the World is Going On. I'm your host, Richard Schaff. Program sponsored by Lincoln Log Homes, Kannapolis, North Carolina. We are pro-Christian, pro-American, pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, and here only by the grace of God. I would mention that we are on YouTube. Oftentimes it's the broadcast you hear. Sometimes it's something different. It is available 24/7. Just dial us up. What in the World is Going On by Richard Schaff. Let's talk about the next move that's appearing, the move to destroy our presidency and our president. You know, we've had a constant effort to get rid of our president. Remember the Green Party? They had a recount. That was the first one. And oh, shucks. And they were going to attack the electoral college members, try to get some of them to switch. And of course, we've had the special counsel ever since the president took office. Then we had the Dems gain control of the House of Representatives. So now we've got impeachment. One thing after another. House Democrats send a message that impeachment is on. Don't let them fool you, folks. That's where they're heading. The chairman of the House Judiciary Committee says there's no doubt President Trump has obstructed justice. It's very clear that the president obstructed justice. Democratic Representative Jared Nadler told us on ABC News last Sunday. He said, and I'm quoting, this is his quote, "It's very clear. 1,100 times he referred to the Mueller investigation as a witch hunt. He tried to protect Flynn from being investigated by the FBI. He fired Comey in order to stop the Russian thing, as he told NBC News. He's dangled he's intimidated witnesses in public." And you thought that sounded a little disjointed. That's an exact quote from Representative Nadler. Think about what will be about the reasons. Calling an investigation a witch hunt is an obstruction of justice? Is it? But Nadler sounded less like a man weighing the evidence than a man who had already made up his mind. Given that Nadler's ABC interview led to this question, President Nixon was threatened with impeachment for obstruction of justice. President Clinton was impeached for obstruction of justice. Why is Nadler, who heads the committee of the House that originates articles of impeachment, not moving forward? Why is he waiting? Why isn't he impeaching Trump right now? Well, by his own words, we don't have the facts yet. That's kind of a perplexing admission for a man who just confidentially enumerated the president's crimes. Impeachment is a long way down the road, folks. But as National Review's Rich Lowry pointed out, no one should believe Nadler's caution. "Don't be fooled," Lowry said, quoting Lowry, "being a long way from impeachment is their first step to impeaching Trump." In that revealing ABC interview, Nadler went on to explain why Democrats have not yet moved to impeach the president. Essentially, he explained, the party doesn't yet have its ducks in a row. There is preparatory work, such as evidence gathering and creating a communication strategy. We've got to do all this before we can go forward. We have to do the investigation and get all this straight, he said. We don't now have evidence all sorted out and everything to do an impeachment. Well, before you impeach somebody, you have to persuade the American public that it ought to happen. You have to persuade enough of the opposition party voters, Trump voters, that have to be persuaded that you're not trying to steal the election. Wow, they wouldn't do that. Or that you're not trying to reverse the results of the last election. Oh, no. Anyway, Nadler's talk with ABC was the clearest indication yet that Dems have decided to impeach Trump and are now simply doing the legwork involved in making that happen. And that means the debate among House Democrats will be a tactical one. What is the best time and way to go forward? rather than a more fundamental discussion of whether the president should or should not be impeached. Last Monday morning, Nadler released a list of 81 names of Trump associates from whom the Judiciary Committee is requesting documents in what he called, quote, the first steps of an investigation into the alleged corruption, obstruction, and other abuses of power by President Trump, his associates, and members of his administration. A quote from Representative Nadler. Other House Democrats are sending similar message. There's abundant evidence of collusion. This, according to House Intelligence Committee Chairman Adam Schiff. He's a shifty guy, isn't he? Anyway, he said this on CBS last Sunday. He's launched a new Russia-Trump investigation to recover the territory covered in the probes done by his own committee, by the Senate Intelligence Committee, and by the Trump-Russia Special Counsel Robert Mueller. I've said that I think we should await the evidence from Robert Mueller as well as our own work, Schiff said. That could mean almost anything. Schiff's committee can and most certainly will investigate Trump for the rest of the president's term. What Schiff did not say is at what point House Democrats will decide to pull the trigger. There'll be other House leaders involved, too. A few days ago, NBC reported that Ways and Means Committee Chairman Representative Richard Neal, Democrat of Massachusetts, he told his staff to prepare a request to the IRS for the president's tax returns. It will, in fact, be a demand. We'll take all necessary steps, including litigation if necessary, to obtain them. That from a spokesman for Nancy Pelosi. That was given to NBC. The administration will likely resist the unprecedented House request, and the process could take time. But Democrats believe, as Pelosi spokesman said, that, quote, all roads lead back to President Trump's finances. So now the Democratic plan is coming into sharper relief. The impeachment decision has been made. Various committee chairs are moving forward in gathering and organizing the formal justification for removing the president. The timing decision is still up in the air, as is the overreaching communications plan, selling impeachment to the American public, or more specifically, those Americans who don't already support impeachment. The sales campaign will most certainly be high-minded. It's our job to protect the rule of law, Nadler said Sunday, this echoing the Republicans who impeached Bill Clinton in the 90s. But whatever the stated rationale, whatever that rationale is, folks believe that impeachment is on. It's on the table, folks. It's coming our way, thanks to the results of the last election. From the other side, Michael Caputo notes, the Dems' Trump probe step up for impeachment. Former Trump campaign advisor Michael Caputo, one of the more than 81 people receiving requests for documents through the House Democrats, said Wednesday he is, quote, disinclined to speak before the House Judiciary Committee if so invited. The committee's letter got to me via the media, he told CNN New Day co-anchor John Berman. Quoting Caputo, to my mind, this is a play for headlines. It's a setup for impeachment, and if I'm invited to speak before the committee, I'm going to have to make a decision on that day. But he said he's disinclined because at the end of the day, they're driving my family and dozens of other families into the poorhouse just because we work for Donald Trump. Caputo downplayed a headline in the Washington Post that said he wasn't going to cooperate, as his attorney did respond to a request for documents with the answer that, quote, we have none of the documents, end quote, being sought. Caputo pointed out that he's already testified twice before Congress, and each time that happens, it costs him between $20,000 or $30,000. Judiciary Chairman Jerry Nadler's office had requested Caputo's contacts between January 1 of 15 through January 2017, including with Trump ally Roger Stone, about whom Caputo had been questioned in the past. That's one of your 81. And Newt Gingrich pointed something out pretty interesting. He pointed out that the Dems are making the same mistakes that the GOP made 20 years ago. He said, and I'm quoting Gingrich, House Democrats are making the same mistake Republicans did 20 years ago while pushing to impeach then-President Bill Clinton. because the more they attack, the more their fight looks phony. That a direct quote from former House Speaker Newt Gingrich, made a week ago this coming Monday. Having all their energy absorbed by Donald Trump, who they hate, and the rise of their left-winged activists, that means they've got no space left to communicate a winning Democratic Party message for 2020. Gingrich told this to Fox News, America's newsroom. I think, in that sense, we had some of the problems, frankly, in 97, 98, dealing with President Bill Clinton. After a while, people render a judgment. They're not going to think this is impeachable. Instead, people will think the charges are all political, and that the constant attacks and investigations are truly destroying the country. A quote from Newt Gingrich. I'll watch us make that mistake, and I'll tell you, I think that Nancy Pelosi is doing a better job of cautioning them to go more slowly than I personally did in 97 and 98. Another quote from Gingrich. That's where they made a mistake last week with Michael Cohen, said Gingrich, quoting him again, when you put a proven convicted liar on national television, the same day that the President of the United States is negotiating over nuclear weapons in North Korea, you give the country a vision of a party that is most destructive of America. Why? For their own partisan reasons. He predicted that Representative Nadler, while saying Monday that the House Judiciary Committee is launching a new probe of Trump, is going to find himself in the same dilemma. Meanwhile, Representative Jim Jordan, I like that guy, he states that Trump hasn't lied about Russia at all. President Donald Trump has never lied about Russia. This is a quote from Representative Jim Jordan, Republican of Ohio. He said it last Sunday. He said it on NBC News, Meet the Press, an interview that focused on former Trump lawyer Michael Cohen's testimony before the House Oversight Committee, on which Jordan serves. Here, the lawmakers mounting a fierce defense of the president. I don't think the president has lied about Russia at all, Jordan declared, but he conceded that other people around the president have lied to law enforcement or Congress. The president surrounded himself with people that maybe he shouldn't, he said, adding about former campaign Paul Manafort, quote, why he chose him, I don't know, end quote. What I am concerned about is our committee is supposed to be in the Government Oversight Committee, and we're supposed to look at abuses, he said, saying we're supposed to focus on what I think they did at the top levels of the FBI. He also said who knows why Russia interfered in the 2016 election. Who knows what their motives were, he asked. I'm quoting Jordan now. What I know is there's not one bit of evidence to show any type of coordination, collusion, conspiracy, none whatsoever between the Trump campaign and Russia to impact the election. But there's all kinds of evidence to show that the Hillary Clinton campaign worked with Russia and the Russians to impact the elections. Well, folks, don't you see, this is just one more move, one more effort to destroy Donald Trump and his presidency. They can't get over. We beat their butts in the election. Well, 2 days ago, the Washington Post headlined with, quote, in America, talks turn to something unspoken for 150 years. Civil war, end quote. Where the heck have these folks been? The independent media has been documenting the rise of the violent left for years. They've been warning the nation was headed for a full-out civil war. Some of us even believe we're already fighting it. As violent the left has spilled blood on those they disagree with, and as the media rushes in to justify their actions, but now we finally see the mainstream media addressing the upcoming civil war. They're finally seeing the danger, folks. Of course, the liberal media is blaming Trump for this, but those of us who are documenting the increased violence against conservatives by liberals and Black Lives Matter groups during the Obama presidency and the cultural war and gender nonsense, along with the attacks against Christian beliefs and the constant class warfare preached by Obama himself as he categorically pushed racial divisions, we knew this was coming long before President Trump came down that escalator, long before he announced his candidacy. Granted, the actual violence has spiked since President Trump won the election, but the bloody attacks have not come from Trump supporters, but rather by liberals and Antifa groups against Trump supporters. It was them with their threats of violence. They've threatened physical attacks. There's been physical attacks. Hundreds upon hundreds of documented examples of the media-approved violence and harassment against conservatives have been out there for all of us to view. Trump derangement syndrome is real. Although now I personally think the mental health experts are calling it Trump anxiety disorder, as infected liberal media journalists work hard to deliberately infect their liberal audience to the point where they just see red, or is it white? Anyway, hate that makes America great again is enough to incite them to violent attack the person that's wearing it. We've seen it repeatedly on your television, in your print. In the minds of these deranged liberal media journalists and reporters, the hundreds of documented examples of liberals attacking and harassing men and women and even children for being conservative or supporting President Trump, all because they haven't gotten over an election that happened over 2 years ago, is somehow President Trump's fault. That's what they believe, rather than acknowledge their own constant incitement to violence by their own daily dose of manufactured outrage. Anyone that thinks they do not want a civil war, those on the left, they're not paying attention. Why do you think the liberals recently given control of the House of Representatives keep passing gun control bills? They know they're not going to pass in the Republican-controlled Senate, and they wouldn't be signed by the president anyway. Why are they pushing them? Because they know that in an all-out civil war, conservatives, Second Amendment supporters, and veterans would fight back, and most of us are armed, locked and loaded, and more than ready to defend themselves and our country. Let me give you an example. The Maryland Sheriff Mike Lewis, Wicomico County, has made it very clear to Maryland lawmakers that should they pass legislation regulating ownership of rifles and shotguns, his office, quote, will not comply, end quote. But he took a further step and told them exactly what millions of law-abiding gun owners have said time and time again. To attempt to confiscate these weapons would be a, quote, suicidal mission, end quote. The way the bill's written, it's impossible to comply, Lewis said, and I'm not going to send my deputies on a suicide mission. Lewis has also been quoted as stating, quote, law-abiding citizens are repeatedly being penalized because of Baltimore City's inability to control their crime. And I'm sorry, but I'm not someone's puppet. I'm going to stand up for what I think is unjust and unconstitutional to the American people, including those people living in the state of Maryland, and end quote, from the good sheriff. That is in a conservative area of a very liberal state. But our liberal D.C. politicians passing for gun controls understand quite clearly that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of sheriffs just like Lewis across our country, and they will be standing side by side with the millions of American gun owners if they try any large-scale confiscation of weapons. Yet they keep trying to pass more and more gun control bills and threatening to go further, knowing that if they succeed, it could lead to a bloody path of epic proportions. Bottom line, I want to ask you, have they lost their collective minds? While conservatives by and large are sick and tired of the bloody left, the violence against innocent men, women, and children all for nothing more than their political ideology, and are ready to defend themselves, their families, and those around them. Those same conservatives who don't want an all-out civil war, despite the increasing frequency of attacks against them by the deranged liberals. Oh yeah, conservatives are ready, but liberals, not only are they in no way prepared for the ramification of what is coming, but despite that, they actually want a civil war. They cannot stand that conservatives have a voice. They cannot stand that conservatives are Second Amendment supporters. Cannot stand that conservatives utilize their free speech rights. And they want to violently end conservatives, even knowing that in a straight-up fight, they, the liberals, cannot win. If that's not crazy, what is? They've lost their collective minds, in my opinion. And that's the bottom line. And the liberal mainstream media sees where all of this is heading, even as they continue to play their part in inciting more and more violent liberals to attack conservatives. And folks, this will not end well. Meanwhile, let's look at what the FBI was willing to do to take out Trump with no evidence. For almost 3 years, Bureaucrats from the Obama administration, including those at the FBI and Justice, tried to take out candidate and then President Trump with no actual evidence. Robert Mueller knows that Michael Flynn didn't violate any laws by talking with a Russian after the election. He knew that Comey tried to entrap Flynn. He knew that the FBI agents didn't think he lied, but badgered and sought to destroy and bankrupt Flynn and his family until he caved in to plead to perjury. Now we learn from an article in the New York Times that the FBI started a secret investigation into whether President Trump worked for Russia, even though there was no evidence, none whatsoever, that he did. In the days after President Trump fired James Comey as FBI director, law enforcement officials became so concerned by the president's behavior that they began investigating whether he'd been working on behalf of Russia against American interests. This, according to former law enforcement officials and others familiar with the investigation. The inquiry carried explosive implications. Counterintelligence investigators had to consider whether the president's own actions constituted a possible threat to national security. Agents also sought to determine whether Mr. Trump was knowingly working for Russia or had willingly fallen under Moscow's influence. Of course, they found nothing. Somehow the Times, other media outlets said that Democrats have absolutely no concern about the abuse of power by the FBI and say it's Trump who should be investigated, even though there's no evidence that Trump did anything wrong. If the FBI is willing to destroy Trump and others surrounding him because they wanted Hillary to be president, what would it be willing to do to the rest of the people? Maybe you and me, folks. Tyranny creeps in on secret FBI investigations, leaked when it's inconvenient to the plotters seeking to oust a duly elected president of the United States. Let's take a short trip down memory lane. See how this fake news from the media started over 2 years ago. And folks, it continues, as you know, to this day. The DNC and Hillary couldn't figure out how to beat Trump based on facts and by promoting their policies, which consistently mainly of making bigger government bigger and more people dependent on government, as they contracted out and paid over $10 million to create a fraudulent dossier about Trump and Russia. They committed a crime by filing false reports with the FEC about these expenses. They shopped the fundamental dossier and found welcoming hands at the FBI from powerful government officials who also wanted to defeat Trump and elect Hillary, no matter what they had to do. Even though these agents couldn't verify any of the garbage in the dossier, they used it to get FISA warrants to listen in on Trump and people surrounding him. They pretended they were concerned about Russian collusion, but not once did they seek to investigate the Russian connections to Hillary, Podesta, and their friends. The Russian collusion story was made up from the start. Obama even gave a stand-down order to a cybersecurity chief in the summer of 2016 to stop investigating Russian hacking. The FBI, intelligence agencies, the Justice Department, and others in the Obama administration colluded to insert spies into the Trump campaign to entrap him, even including George Papadopoulos. While these partisan hacks at Justice and FBI were targeting Trump at every turn, they were protecting Hillary, her aides, Obama, and others from prosecution no matter what they did. James Comey listed their crimes that Hillary and her aides committed and yet had exonerated her even before she was interviewed. Comey lied when he said no prosecutor would take her case. Not once did these partisan hacks take the criminal actions of Hillary and her aides to a grand jury and let them decide. President Obama also violated the law by corresponding with Hillary on her non-secure computer and then lied about it. While the media and Democrats spew forth without pretend obstruction by Trump when there was no underlying crime, they overlooked many cases about actual obstruction during Obama's 8 years. The computers at the IRS were destroyed, and Obama publicly said he didn't see a smidgen of evidence that the IRS had done anything wrong as its agents were stifling the political speech rights of political opponents. Hillary and her aide destroyed emails, smartphones, and computers. The Mueller team destroyed text messages and evidence of partisan hack agents who were fired. The DNC wouldn't let government agencies examine their computers, yet government agencies, the media, and other Democrats universally said Russians hacked the computers with no physical evidence. Why would anyone believe the DNC? Why would they believe them when they said that it created the fraudulent dossier and lied to the FEC? The abuse and tyrannical nature of the Obama administration has been completely obvious. Yet the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, ABC, NBC, CBS, NPR, and others, they haven't cared. They supported him at every turn as they set out to destroy Trump with fake news from anonymous sources with no evidence. Despite the clear evidence that Obama controlled the Justice Department and that many people associated with Obama, including Hillary, violated many laws, the media and other Democrats say the Justice Department operated independently and no one was above the law. The fake reporting, folks, is endless. It is truly endless. Remember Henry Kissinger? A lot of times I didn't agree with him. He goes back to the Nixon era. He's still around. He's now 94 years old. Well, recently Henry Kissinger did an interview and said very amazing things regarding President Trump. What did he say? Well, he started with, Donald Trump is a phenomenon that foreign countries haven't seen before. The former Secretary of State, Henry Kissinger, gives us a new understanding of President Donald Trump's foreign policy and predicts his success. Liberals and all those who favor Hillary are never going to admit it. They'll never admit that he's one true leader. The man is doing changes like never before. And he does it all for the sake of this nation's people. After 8 years of tyranny, we finally see a difference. Kissinger knows it, and he continues with, every country now has got two things to consider. One, their perception that the previous president or the outgoing president basically withdrew America from international politics, so they had to make their own assessments of the necessities. And secondly, that there's a new president who's asking a lot of unfamiliar questions. And because of the combination of the partial vacuum and the new questions, one could imagine that nothing remarkable and new emerges out of it. Then Kissinger puts it bluntly. You see, Trump puts America and its people first. That's why the people love him. And this is why he'll remain in charge for so long. There's not a single thing wrong with him, and the people need to open their eyes. A quote from Kissinger. When he boasts that he has a bigger red button than Kim Jong-un does, he so transcends the mealy-mouthed rhetoric of the past, thereby forcing a new recognition of American power. Kissinger once wrote, and I'm quoting, "The weak grow strong by effrontery. The strong grow weak through inhibition." End quote. No sentence better captures the U.S.-North Korea relationship. Trump is discarding the inhibitions and calling the bluff of the North Koreans effrontery. His point is that the contrast of America's retreat under Obama and its new assertion of power under Trump creates a new dynamic that every one of our allies and of our enemies must consider. Our allies grew complacent with Obama's passivity and now are fearful due to Trump's activism, and they must balance the two in developing their policies. They realize that the old assumptions categorized by Bush 43's preoccupation with Iraq and Obama's refusal to lead, they're now obsolete. So Trump is forcing a new calculus with a new power behind American interests. Those here and abroad who rode the old apple cart worry about it being toppled. But as Kissinger so boldly stated, Trump is the one true leader in world affairs, and he's forcing policy changes that put America first. This is the most accurate statement of what the American citizens who live outside of the swamp want and expect from their government. He's got a list of 13 things he would like to see as a senior American citizen. What are they? Number one, Hillary held accountable for her previous wrongs. 2, put God back in America. 3, borders closed or tightly guarded. 4, Congress on the same retirement and health care plans as everybody else. Congress obey its own laws now. Language, English. Culture, Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Drug-free, mandatory drug screening before and during welfare. Freebies, none to non-citizens. Budget, balance the damn thing. 11, foreign countries, stop giving them our money. Charge them for our help. We need it here. 12, limit terms for Congress. And most of all, 13, respect our military and our flag and our law enforcement. We, the people, are coming. Goodbye until next week.